Hello and welcome back to another episode of Gaming the System, the podcast where three intersectional feminists examine gaming and games through a feminist lens. I'm your host for today, I'm Jem, and I'm here with my friends Alex and Matt. So before we get started, if you want to support us, you can subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/gaming the system for some exclusive content, or you can send us a one-off donation via PayPal to our email address, wearegamingthesystem@gmail.com. So I don't really watch the Olympics. I mean, I'm not anti the Olympics. I just don't tend to watch sport very much. So it doesn't really feature on my radar other than that it's happening in the background. But I am usually quite interested in the sort of dramas that happen around it. And there are always many, many dramas. So we're going to kind of cover some of them today. And I know that you two are very into these things. So what I thought was, when we talked about it and we said we wanted to do the Olympics, I sort of said, well, I will host this and I can ask the questions and you can answer them, because that way it doesn't matter that I don't know anything about it, and I will come out having learned some stuff, I think. What I wanted to do was, we're going to kind of whistle stop tour through it, because there's quite a lot to talk about, and it would be nice if we can kind of cover as much as possible, but it's going to be a bit up and down throughout the episode. There's some quite heavy stories, and then there are some more lighter topics. So I'm going to just start off with a bit of a trigger warning. Just as always with our podcast, apply caution and tread carefully and do what you need to do. We won't be offended if you skip bits, and we would rather that you looked after your mental health. So there will be talk about lots of topics that might be triggering for people. So just be careful. But none of it is stuff that isn't already in the media, as far as I'm aware, so it shouldn't, none of it should come as a surprise. I just don't want it to distress anyone. So what I wanted to do before we get into all that heavy stuff is to talk about the opening ceremony, and I'm going to ask Alex and Matt for their thoughts on the opening ceremony in just a minute, but I just wanted to give you some facts for from the opening ceremony. So this year it was hosted effectively on the Seine River. Is it Seine or Seine?
Seine.
Good.
Yeah.
And this is the first time. Yeah, this is the first time that they've hosted an opening ceremony on a river. So that was exciting. They've been planning it for ages. They had lots of contingencies for weather, and unfortunately the weather did not play nicely, and it did bucket down for most of the ceremony, but I think everyone still had a pretty good time. I didn't watch all of it. I watched some bits of it, and I'm also on a WhatsApp group where they were watching it, so I was getting regular updates of what was going on and all the exciting bits. They were expecting about 1.5 billion people to watch it around the world, which is just crazy. I don't know what the final figure was, but that was the expectation. And 206 countries took part in that opening ceremony, which is amazing. And one of the things that I like about the Olympics is that no matter what else is going on in the world, people are still able to get together and come together in this international event. And I know not everyone was there, and I know not everyone was welcome there, but I think it's really nice that so many countries can compete and do compete in the games. So what I was wondering was whether you guys had any thoughts about, I didn't see this, I just read about it, but had any thoughts about this masked person who was running and jumping and climbing through the city. And some people online have likened them, and I've seen a picture and it looks fab, of to Assassin's Creed, and apparently looked quite a lot like, the characters from that. And I was just wondering whether you guys had seen that and
Well,
what you thought about
I
who
as
this
soon as I
masked
saw
person
it,
was.
it just triggered the memory of Arno from Assassin's Creed Unity, which is the Assassin's Creed set in Paris, of course, in France. And so I think it was a definite nod to that because he was doing a lot of parkour, a lot of rooftop running, a lot of jumping, lots of generally being mysterious and not we don't know who he is. He's in the shadows, but also given that Ubisoft is French. I guess it's kind of a nod to like, this is what we do in France, aren't we amazing? Look at this game that we've made. Um, and also, incidentally, I know they took lots of scans of all the buildings around Paris. You might already know that they're rebuilding Notre Dame after the fire that happened, and hopefully it should open either at the end of this year or early next year. But they actually used the scans that they had to make Unity's version of Notre Dame to help in the rebuilding of the building after the fire, which I think is very cool. That they've kind of gone back to Ubisoft and been like, can we see your 3D scans, please? We need to see what it
That's
looked like
very
before.
cool. Yeah,
But yeah, that was really cool. But I definitely
that
think it
is
was a
cool.
nod to Assassin's Creed. There's a lot of weird things in the opening ceremony, but given that it's very French, there's probably a lot of things that were lost, perhaps slightly lost in translation. There was a really cool bit, which was kind of like a nod to Marie Antoinette. Sorry, my nose is really runny. Excuse me. Sorry, audio listeners. Um, and they had like a metal band playing to kind of talk about her being beheaded and all that sort of stuff. There was lots of musical interludes. There was an allusion to a threesome at one point, which I'm
Yeah,
sure got everyone very heated up on Twitter and all sorts of other places. There was a fashion show, kind of catwalk in the middle of the river over one of the bridges that was getting
Threesome.
absolutely soaked. So I feel really bad for everyone on that catwalk because it looked pretty dangerous, to be honest. But
Did you
you were
say
going to say, Matt?
threesome?
A threesome, yeah.
What was
Yeah,
that?
when they went to like the library area, and there were three young people in there reading books, and then they all sort of looked at each other and were like, "Come on, then, let's go." And then they ran off into a building, and the last thing you see is women shutting the door again, like that. And it was all about love. The section was about love, so they had different
Okay.
sections, and they had
a
different themes.
menage, menage a
Menage a
trois.
trois.
Nah.
Yes,
Yes.
basically, France was saying, "We enjoy sex. Here it is on screen, but not really." Um, yeah, which I thought was very funny. But yeah, it's interesting. I thought it was very brave of them to do it on a river. I can see why it's never been done on a river before, because it took a very long time, and I don't think it had quite
Mm,
the same atmosphere as the stadium, but it was certainly impressive. I was just sad that it rained so much, and there were certain
mm,
elements that took like probably twice as long as what they really wanted. Like the metal horse that was making its way along the river was really cool, but after about 5 minutes, you're like, has it got there yet, or are we just gonna watch it for another 5 minutes? Um, but yeah, overall, I thought it was quite impressive, and I enjoyed it. Yeah, and then it ended, of course, with Celine Dion at the top of the Eiffel Tower, singing, which was really impressive as well. Lots of tennis people in the torch handover section as well, which I thought was cool to see that represented, being a fan of that sport. But yeah, definitely a memorable opening ceremony.
Yeah.
mm.
The first. So my family were watching it, and I walked in, and they showed me a clip, which was when they were going past the. I'm pretty sure it was the. Oh, what's the name of the prison? What's the name of the prison?
The Bastille.
Bastille.
That's
The
that's
Bastille.
it. Yeah.
And going past that, and it had Gojira, which is the heavy metal band that were on like ledges out of it. That was very cool. And then there's this shot of a guy who had to have been an Assassin's Creed character, as he was there with his hood up, the very distinctive hood, and he was holding a torch. And I thought, oh yes, it would make sense that they had that. And I was thinking, Assassin's Creed Unity wasn't the biggest Assassin's Creed game, but then you go, oh yeah, that Ubisoft are French, so obviously that would make sense. Having it on the river, it's sort of like nothing is ever going to top China in 2008. I don't think, because that was ridiculous.
But yeah.
Yeah, and hundreds of people who trained for 16 hours a day wearing nappies so they didn't have any toilet breaks, and so yeah, probably not worth the human rights abuses, but it looked good. Yeah. Yes, and the rain is like, it couldn't have been more like extreme in terms of rain. No half measures in any of it. I didn't know Celine Dion was French.
I think she's
thought
French
she was Canadian.
Or maybe she's Canadian and speaks French, and they were like, well, she can sing in French, we'll stick her on there. Yeah.
I'm not sure what the relationship is between France and Canada, because our queen is on their money, which doesn't make any sense, and they still have royal everythings, which is wild. And there was a very cool bit where they had, I think it was a glass, what they're called, guillotine
oh, yeah.
going past, and there was cool. Sprays of red going on it, and yeah, that was really cool. And yeah, I love every time I see a real life location that's been done in Assassin's Creed. I love that.
It's so good. Well, the other thing I forgot to mention, they had in the middle they had a section on like pioneering women. And they had like golden statues for each of them, and then it talked about like what they had done in history to like further the cause of women's rights, which was cool. I'd completely forgotten about that until just now. Yeah, that was quite interesting. That was just on one section of the river. I forget which section it was, because they had like liberty, eternity, whatever, the French thing. And lots of other French words that were all different sections. But yeah, that one was quite cool, I remember. But yeah, so that was nice to see a nod to that.
So Celine Dion is not French. She is from Quebec in Canada. Oh. So she speaks French and has connections to that. However, there are 22% of French speakers. 22% of Canadians are French speakers, so there is obviously quite a close link between Canada and France. There you go, a little bit of pop information there. That'll help you with your next quiz. Is Celine Dion French? So one of the things that caused a little bit of controversy was a scene at the end of the show with Dionysus and a blue Dionysus for some reason, and on a long table, and a bunch of drag queens and other sort of fancily dressed people. And in the middle of the table behind Dionysus, who's the god of feasting and festivals and wine and all of that, was a person with a sort of halo-style crown that sort of had like a sort of sun-style crown, I should say. And there was a bit of controversy around this because some people said that the scene was a replica of the Last Supper, and obviously this was an offence to all sorts of people, and I think that even the Vatican said that they thought it was regrettable, or they were very disappointed by it, or something along those lines. And sadly, when I did a search for it, I came across a news article, and sorry, this just made me laugh so much. the person that they have a picture of at the top of this article, which is titled "Claims that Olympic Opening Ceremony Mocked Christianity, Ignore the Long-Standing Connection Between Jesus and Dionysus." I don't know how the
What?
article goes
Huh?
into that, but this is from The Conversation. But the thing that really tickled me is that the picture is Andrew Tate holding up a little picture of the Last Supper, and then the image of the from the Olympics. And I just felt like if you have like if you're using Andrew Tate as your
Yeah.
bastion of
Christianity. That's
Christianity
so
and
odd.
all things good, it just felt like it was just so weird. But anyway, that wasn't the point really, but it just made me laugh. Did you have any thoughts on that? Did you have
I
any
think that's
have
stretching
you
it.
seen it?
I think that's stretching it. I mean, I watched it and just thought it was weird. And then I was like, oh, France, being France. Um, yeah, by that point in the evening, it was like, a good three-quarters of the way through, and then it had gone on to like the Dionysus section, and everyone was like, well, this is a bit weird, isn't it? And then we all sort of moved on. But then there
Yeah.
was a dance section after it that went on for like a little bit too long. I think saying that it's like mocking the Last Supper is probably seeing what people wanted to see, maybe a little bit of that. Um, because I don't know. I mean, I don't know the person that designed it, what their intentions were behind it. There are probably going to be a lot of similarities between the Last Supper and a lot of
Mm.
other things that where people are at a dinner table. You know, I don't know. I don't want to draw too many comparisons, or I might get in trouble as well. But yeah, I feel like they're stretching it slightly, and I think they're probably not. I don't think it was meant to be taken seriously in any way.
No.
I got that feeling, given that he was like fully blue and basically naked, except for
Yeah.
like a small pouch of some kind. It
Yeah.
became uncomfortable to watch and just weird. And I was like, well, I'm gonna go and make a cup of tea at this point, or whatever. Just go and leave the room and come back in 5 minutes. Um, but yeah, it was interesting. But I don't think it's mocking Christianity. No.
Dionysus is a Greek god. So
Mhm.
nothing
It,
couldn't be
no.
less. You couldn't have less to do with Jesus.
I
Exactly.
know.
And anything religious, because religions have such like die hard opinions on things. Going, oh, this they're making fun of the Last Supper and clutch my pearls,
Yeah.
and go, oh no. But then one thing I think has stood out for me this Olympics is that there have been the good stuff has overwhelmed the bad stuff.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
proactive good stuff is overwhelming the proactive bad stuff. So
Mm.
in Olympics past 20 years ago, making fun of the Last Supper, that would have been the front page news of things, and going, oh no, it just doesn't matter. That's the truth of it. None of that matters.
Mm.
Whereas I was googling because I reflect like we talk occasionally about being LGBT in sport. And Alex and I talked a lot about on the tennis about how moving the tennis championships for the next 6 years to Saudi Arabia is going to keep another generation of female tennis players and male tennis players in the closet to protect their careers.
Yeah. Yeah.
But this turns out this is the most has the most out LGBT athletes in any Olympics ever, with about 200.
Oh wow! I didn't know that. That's good.
And so that's people from all over the world, and seem to be a lot more out lesbians than gay men out, which is an interesting thing.
Mm.
But that's the thing. You need to get everyone from all of these countries. The entire world is watching, and
Mm.
you see the entire gamut of LGBT people. And Tom Daley actually said in a speech recently that clutch your pearls about these are something that you should clutch your pearls about. With 206 countries. It's good that all countries from over all the world are, but a large amount of them being gay is illegal.
Yeah.
And
Or at least socially unacceptable.
yeah, and he said that we should ban countries where being gay is a death penalty offence. Countries that have, say, you're allowed to kill gay people, that should be the offensive part, the bit that everyone should be focusing on. And there have been a lot of instances in this when there like a controversy has come up, and it's just been swallowed with good things around it. And so that the Last Supper thing hadn't even crossed my mind, and yeah, it just doesn't matter. There's so many good things to talk about.
And one of the things that was really good, I think you mentioned, Alex, when we were chatting about this, which was that we finally achieved gender parity at this year's Olympics.
This was the first Olympics with 50-50 gender parity, equal amounts of men and women competing in total, which is it's surprising actually that it's actually taken this long. I can't remember when women first started competing, but obviously since then it's been a gradual step up to parity. And I think I read, I should have written down the figures, but before the Olympics started, they went through Team GB and said about the number of women was actually more than the number of men in our team. And that I think at least 10 or more were mothers as well, which I thought was interesting. Because that's often a big thing made in sport too.
So in 1900, that was when women competed for the first games in Paris. So there you go. Women first competed in the games in Paris, and then we reached gender parity in Paris. There was 997 athletes that year, and 22 women competed. So it wasn't quite, and one of the sports that they competed in was croquet. so yeah. But I think, Matt, you wanted to talk a bit about the pregnant competitors, because there were a few.
It's so cool because the entire one of the things that the Olympics is incredibly powerful for in terms of women's rights is it shows the full gamut of how women's bodies can be. Because normally you see one body shape. It's the what's the woman who played Barbie? What's her name? I know what her name is. She's it's got an M in it somewhere. Basically, like forever, 99% of women you see anywhere have that same body type. Whereas you go to the Olympics and you see that every single body that is in this competition, that body has been crafted to perform a task. It's got nothing to do with how it's supposed to look. How it looks is a byproduct of the task that it's meant to be performing. And you see the tiny little Simone Biles gymnasts and divers, and then you see these massive, epic powerlifting women who are huge, and it blows out of the water all of so many gender expectations, because Margot Robbie, thank you Jen, I knew it started with an M. Margot Robbie body shape, and so blowing out of the water. So now 50-50. Oh yeah, there are as many female athletes as male athletes, and people care about them just as much. You put them there and you go, oh yeah, people, it doesn't matter. People care because they're good to watch, entertainment. So it comes with body shape, and then seeing LGBT women, another thing. Oh yeah, not all women are straight, and they're all in all different phases of relationships and having children as well. So the entire sort of like stereotypes of what a woman's life is meant to be blown out of the water. and showing like this is the full breadth of what they can be. And you say this one has children, this one's gay and has children, and then this one's pregnant, and all of that coming together, this melting pot of going, yes, this is it. This is the future we could have, and I've never felt that way. Like I've never seen it so clearly, sort of shown before, because it's one of those things that people need to see it and see it and see it and see it until they barely notice it. And this is one of those times I go, yes, I see it, and it's awesome.
Yeah, and I think it's so important to see it, because that just helps us to really get our head around the fact that it is actually possible, because we are such visual creatures, and we need to see it. And I think it's really interesting that it makes headline news. I mean, I was just reading about the one person was like, oh, she was competing in the archery at 6.5 months, and it's like, okay, it's slightly complicated because you have a bit of a bump, but 6.5 months isn't fully pregnant, and you absolutely can pull a bow. And it's just this idea that pregnant women, or women who are mothers, are or pregnant people who are parents, have this inability to compete at the top of their game, that somehow it prevents us from being excellent. And I think one of the things that most people who have been pregnant or who have children will say is that if you want something enough, then it won't prevent you from being at the top of your game. It doesn't it has an impact, believe me, it has an impact, but it doesn't have to get in the way. It doesn't have to stop that. And it's really nice to see these women out there properly representing that, and showing the world that that it is perfectly possible to do these things.
Just before we came on to the episode today, I was watching a video of Andrea, I can't pronounce her surname, but the daughter of Fred from First Dates. She was one of our GB divers. She's quite young. She's doing her A-levels, and she won a bronze medal, and then came sixth in the second competition. And she was actually on, I think it was Lorraine or something, talking about competing like while on your period and stuff, and the stigma around people on their periods in sport as well. So that just reminded me, when we were talking obviously just now about pregnancy and things, that also women are competing while on their periods or in different parts of their cycles, and that's obviously going to have an impact on how they're feeling and how they compete on the day as well. And I think it's really great that it's
absolutely
yeah.
Megan Rapinoe, the American football superstar, she started a social media campaign where she's paying athletes to talk about periods, and that's exactly what it needs.
Yeah, it does. And I think, the irony of this is that we're sort of going like, oh, they competed while they were pregnant. Oh my gosh, they competed while they had their period. And in like a week's time or so, 10 days time, we're going to kick off with the Paralympics, where people are going to be competing with all sorts of things going on that might make things a little bit more complicated. And I think it's just really interesting that we have such almost a juxtaposition of views on what we think people are and aren't capable of. So I think it's really good, and I think that is one of the things actually. And I think you touched on it, Matt, as well, with the comments about these amazing female weightlifters, and these women who are just doing these amazing things that people say women don't do those things. And I think one of the things that I like about the Olympics is that you are seeing people at the top of their game. These people are the best in the world, and we often spend a lot of our time bemoaning the fact that we're all expected to aspire to this, but we do. But it's amazing what these people can do. It's amazing the dedication that they put in, and the time. And I think it's it's just a really interesting parade of people who are just really good at their job. So carrying on with the gender topic, I think we kind of can't have this conversation without talking about the boxing gender debate that came up quite early on in the Olympics, and this was around Iman Khalif, who was apparently disqualified from. Well, actually, Alex, do you want to explain this one, because
So
I think
basically, she ended up winning gold in the one of the women's categories. They have different weight categories for different types of boxers, depending on how much their body type and how much they weigh and things. And there was controversy over her competing, and also a Chinese athlete, Lin. I can't remember the rest of her name, sorry. But both of them were previously disqualified by the body that used to govern boxing. I think it's the International Boxing something. But anyway, it was the
the
interesting
International
thing.
Boxing Association.
Thank you, the IBA. And the interesting thing is that the IOC, which is the International Olympic Committee, has basically shut them down because they had some concerns over how they were being run. It was Russian led, and so there's some well, in my words, shadiness about how it was being run and the agendas behind the bans for those women competing, given that Russia obviously has an anti-LGBTQ trans agenda. You know, you can't not talk about those things, and it's kind of a weird coincidence that it's Russian-led in my eyes. But anyway, so that they got that organisation has broken down. So there's essentially no organisation in charge of organising boxing outside of the Olympics now. And so the IOC has organised this competition and said, yes, these women can compete under the rules that we have decided. And everyone says, oh, they shouldn't be there. And it was, I think, the second round, Iman's opponent, an Italian lady, basically pulled out after 46 seconds because she said, I had never been hit so hard in the face and I had to preserve my life, quote, and then said lots of other things that kind of threw her gender into disrepute and kind of made people question it, and then it kind of took off online, as it is wont to do, and lots of very mouthy anti-trans people, you know, the ones I mean, spouted off on Twitter about them being a man and how they shouldn't be allowed to compete and why has this been allowed to happen and we need to protect women in sports, blah blah blah, while also not acknowledging the fact that the Netherlands had a convicted paedophile on their team, which I think is rather ironic, really, when you think about it. But the IOC have come out and addressed all of this and said this is not a trans issue. It's nothing to do with Iman being trans, because she isn't trans. She was born a woman. You know, it's on her registered certificates, and you know, that's not in debate here. But the furore is around these tests that the IBA carried out. No one's seen these tests. No one knows what they're about, what the results are. But there's lots of speculation as to like if they were chromosome tests, and then lots of people were calling for athletes to be swabbed like they were in the 1980s. And then there was lots of talk about DSD, which is, I forget the actual medical term, but it's where it's to do with the genitals and you know, those being in a different way to the typical way.
Is it intersex?
That's right. Yeah, that's what meant to say. And then
I
also like
thought.
levels of testosterone as well, because naturally all humans have different levels of testosterone. It's not a thing that just men have, women have testosterone too. And both these women apparently have higher levels of testosterone. Um, and that's basically a summary of it. Yeah,
It's a lot. That's a lot. I
it
mean,
is.
in Algeria, where she comes from, it's not legal to be trans. So it's such the whole thing is so
Exactly that.
steeped in
Yeah.
problems that a whole bunch of people just ran off with this idea, and they were so irresponsible in their handling of it and their conversation around it. It was
Yeah.
irresponsible and it was insensitive. And
Particularly even some of the
at the
BBC
end,
pundits as well, and a former boxer, Nicola Adams, even tweeted about it, which I thought was really bad form. Yeah.
yeah. And I think what it does do is it demonstrates that it isn't a simple, that this is not a simple topic.
No,
There
no,
is a lot
yeah,
of nuance here, and there's a lot of issues here. And so the idea that, we talk a lot about like whether trans women should be allowed to compete, and obviously in this case she's not trans, but I think what this does raise is that it's not about your biological sex. It's about many other factors, and some of those are things like, do you come from a wealthy country? It's no surprise, is it, that the top three countries were the USA, and then China, which has billions and billions of people, and I hope I'm just making that number up, and then the UK. That we've got these wealthy countries at the top of the medal board at the end of the Olympics, and that's a factor. That there are so many factors in play as to whether or not somebody is able to take part in the Olympics. And I think it's just horrendous what Khalifa's had to go through. And I hope
apparently I've
that,
heard she is launching legal
she,
action, but
yeah, and
for
she did win
discrimination.
win gold. So
Exactly, and that's what
she's,
she set
yeah,
out to do. So, and she has been beaten by women in previous competitions as well. So it's not like she's never lost
no,
against other women. But yeah,
no,
I think an
absolutely.
interesting point that I picked up on just as the closing ceremony was starting, Claire Balding was interviewing Matthew Pinsent as one of the pundits, and saying what were the strengths of the games, what were the challenges, and then instead of talking about like the issues with pollution in the River Seine or whatever else, he launched straight in on the boxing, and he said this line which obviously I don't agree with, but he said. You can't have you can say you want inclusion, but it has to be fair. Why can't you? I don't agree there necessarily. Why can't you have both? So clearly his views
Yeah.
were against what had been taking
Mm,
place, and he
mm,
took no pains to hide that, and it was not challenged either, which I didn't particularly enjoy watching.
no.
But there's a lot of people saying, "Oh well, it's all very well having these people in the competition, but that's not fair for the sport." But like, I just don't really understand that argument because, like, how far do you take it? If you think about the
Mm,
Paralympics, this is the one thing I don't like about organised sport is that it's very categorised, and even in the
mm,
Paralympics, if you're not a certain level of impairment, then you can't compete in that category because it would be deemed an unfair advantage. So I think I remember Alfie Hewitt, who's one of our most successful wheelchair tennis players, um, couldn't actually, or thought he wasn't going to be able to continue in the sport because of a rule change back a good couple of years ago now. But he had to appeal to actually be able to compete in the sport because he
mm,
wasn't deemed impaired enough to actually compete. So he was kind of left in this no man's land. And it's like, yeah, it's one of those things which irritates me about the structure of sporting competitions. It's that it's very sort of rigid in the way that I understand on in some aspects why, obviously, because you need to control like the level of competition, but also it is limiting in that way. And I don't know the solution, but it's one of the things that irks me slightly about it. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and also the way that we've talked about how amazing it is that everyone reaches this peak level. It's basically everyone in their top form. Did any of you read about the sprinter who didn't mention that he had COVID? And
Yes, I
then,
did hear about
yeah,
that. Yeah.
and then had to be carried off the track or taken off the track in a wheelchair because he'd
Yeah.
lost his breath, obviously,
Yeah.
running with
Yeah.
COVID. And like thinking about how impossible that would have been at like Tokyo 2020 and how blasé
Mm.
everyone is about it now and the danger. No one's mentioned how dangerous it was for him, his long-term like health, and also the health of the other athletes and the volunteers and everyone around him, his team, everybody.
Mm.
But I just think they kind of glossed over that and didn't really focus in
Mm.
on it. But that kind of shows how much we, when we're watching and when we're taking part, value the sport over other things, which maybe we should be thinking
Yeah.
about a little bit more.
Yeah. I think
Yeah,
that's a really important point, and I think these people have sacrificed a lot, whether even if it's just time and cake and fish and chips,
yeah.
all those
I
lovely
don't know.
things.
Yeah,
But yeah, I mean these are not. I mean this in the kindest way, but these are not normal people. This is
mm-mm.
not
No.
average
Yeah,
behavior.